Hello fellow gamers, this is SamY7, Tim, and I want to talk a little bit about how, as GMs, we can give some of the reins to the players. As far as the story goes, as far as descriptive detail goes, and to kind of alleviate the burden on the GMs. I've played a few story games, sometimes called story jamming, which, depending on the game, I've had different reactions to. But one thing that I think that we can bring into traditional RPGs is some of the ideas that players can be more creative than a lot of the standard traditional RPGs let them. For instance, I'm running a Vampire the Masquerade and a few werewolves in a game, and I let the players describe things that I would normally describe. I'll ask them, well, what does the victim look like? What happened when you do that? Basically, I give them more area to describe things, and a reason to help me out where I can sit back a little bit and have them describe some minor things in the game. But anyway, with story games, there are some GM-less games out there. And a lot of them kind of rotate between the players the GMing duties, or as my friend Jason says, pass the adversity around the table. There's a game called Polaris that does this, which is like a game of chivalric tragedy in the far north. I played it twice, and I don't know. I enjoyed it. I think a lot of times, a lot of these games, you need to sit around the table with people that are either very creative or have GM games in the past, because I think it prepares you for being creative. I know a lot of players, they almost want to be railroaded, which is kind of sad, I think, from my perspective. They want the easy choices. They want the railroad tracks laid on the ground, and I'm just not that GM. For those players, eventually they get used to my style, and they're like, oh, so I have to do more creative stuff. Some of them kind of aren't really sure what to do. I tend to run more sandbox type games, where a sandbox type game is basically you lay out the world, you lay out all the things that are out there, and you just let the players, tell you where they go, what do they do, and then you describe what they see, and you just go from there. I find that Rules-lite games are the best for this kind of shoot-from-the-hip way of running games. And also, spiral world building will help you out a lot with that, where you make stuff, but you don't really know where it's going to go, and you just wait to pull it out of your big GM box whenever they need to interact with something. Oh, what do you see on the horizon? Let me look in my box. Oh, I found this. This is what your guy's going to see. And I find that gives the illusion of free choice, but it is free choice because I really don't have any set schedule or set story arc ready for them. But anyway, so as a GM, how can you incorporate some of these collaborative ideas from story games? In the Barbarians Lemuria game, there's a thing called Twist of Fate, where you can spend hero points and change minor details in the story. Or, maybe if you're running a storyteller game, maybe you could turn a botch into just a failure, or things like that. I think you can bolt hero points, fate points, whatever the case may be, onto any system. And I know 7th Sea has a sort of narrative player ability. I've never really played 7th Sea, but I saw a game that was in progress. And as GMs, I think we need to be a little less power hungry at times. Maybe we're used to the paradigm where it's one person telling the story, and the players are the parts. And while I don't think I want to go, I don't always enjoy the story game atmosphere over here, and I'm kind of getting away from the more traditional GM over here. I'm trying to find some sort of middle hybrid ground. I think Rules-lite games would be the best to do this with, but I think maybe more crunchy games you could add more player input. If you're running a fantasy game, for instance, instead of spending hours and hours and hours by yourself, tell the players before the game, maybe even a month before the game, maybe longer. Maybe while you're running another game, say, okay, I'm going to be running my game next, and player A, you got the top of the map. Player B, you got the south of the map. Player C, west. Player D, east. And say, come up with, I don't know, 2 or 3 cultures, two or three races. If it's not a fantasy game, come up with something else. If it's more of a modern game, maybe divide a city map up and say, okay, what gangs, what social cliques, what supernatural beings, if it's World of Darkness, who resides here, and let them do some of your work for you. This will have some more player buy-in, and they'll enjoy, hopefully, also tinkering a little bit, so that it's not quite the same workload as a GM would have. So you don't want to squeeze your players you don't want to pile so much stuff on your players that they don't want to play anymore. But at the same time, it would alleviate some of the burden on the GM. And whenever the game does get going, feel free to let them describe things. Like if a player says, I go down this alley, what do I see? Maybe turn it back on them and say, I don't know. What do you see? What's in that alley? Are there any people in it? And let the shock kind of wash over them first, and let them describe what they see. And you have like veto power still, because I still think one person with most of the authority is good. I think it provides a sort of, the referee thing, where if some player comes up with something completely ridiculous, I still hold the right to say, that just breaks the entire theme, the entire mood, whatever the case may be. But instead of holding on to the reins so tight, oh no, it's my game, open up your hand a little bit and let some of the players describe things. Let's say you're in a fantasy game and, I don't know, they come onto the top of some ship after swimming to it from another ship. And they say, oh, what do I see? And just say, I don't know. What do you see on the enemy pirate ship? And at first, it's kind of an alien concept. It really is. Because we're so used to that paradigm of the one person always describing their surroundings. And I found that when I do this in a game, at first it's awkward. It's always a little bit awkward because players are used to just being players. They're not used to having too much input otherwise. Like I said, I normally run games. I would love to be able to world build something and then play in it. And I never get to do that. I really don't. If I world build something, no one else is really going to want to run it other than me because I put all the effort into it. There was one game where I got to design a race, and I really enjoyed doing that. I came up with some of the cultural taboos and so forth. And I had a blast. I really enjoyed it. So don't be afraid as a GM to give your players a little bit more narrative freedom. Give them the opportunity to use their creativity and to alleviate workload a little bit. I think we're so used to, we're almost afraid of our players. And again, you have to know your group. Some groups this may not work. Some players really aren't that creative. I really think our world kind of turns us into gears sometimes where, our job is to perform duty A, and they don't give a crap about anything other than doing, that particular task. So, but try to encourage creativity in your gaming group, and maybe bolt on some sort of hero point thing where they can spend a hero point and have some small narrative control for a small period of time. And if you haven't checked any story games out, like Dogs in the Vineyard or maybe even Shock for the sci-fi fans, do it.